Serving as the voice and aspirations of the private sector-led community in the ASEAN Business Advisory Council, ASEAN Bac, consistently aims to advance the central power of the region towards more innovative and inclusive goals. Our reporter Bramuda talked with Bapak Arsjad Rasjid, the chairman of ASEAN Bac, who shared more about the accomplishment of ASEAN and the ASEAN Bac after of ASEAN Bac consultations meeting at the 55th ASEAN Economic Ministers meeting.
The ASEAN Business Advisory Council meeting have been concluded, and now in the 55th ASEAN Economic Minister meeting, we will learn more about what's the result and what is ahead of us of ASEAN with Mr. Arsjad Rasjid. Mr. It's really a pleasure for me to talk to you, but I have several questions. The first one would be, you set your 5 priorities and it hasn't been changed since your first appointment as the chairman of ASEAN Business Advisory Council. But what's the new breakthrough that are offered on the table for ASEAN Business Advisory Council?
Yeah, first of all, let me just repeat the 5 priorities, which is very important for ASEAN. Why since the beginning until now the priority do not change? Because it is important priorities, right? So because we talk about digital transformation, we discuss about sustainable development, we discuss about health resilience, we talk about food security, and trade and investment facilitation, right? So those are 5 priorities that really the ASEAN nations, every stakeholder in ASEAN believe those are the 5 priorities. That's why it never changed. But what happened interestingly is that what changes actually the legacies. We started off with 6 legacies. Now we end up with actually 8 legacies, right? So that's something is adding up, not actually subtracting it, right? So this is a very clear proof that the priority is correct. The legacy is strengthening, right? So I mean the digital QR code. The QR code for payments. Everyone agrees, and this is a show of centrality of ASEAN, and so that's why it's being supported. And we are aligned with the central bank and the finance ministers that we need to have this payment system among ASEAN countries, right? The wiki entrepreneurs is something that everyone is loving it, and it becomes on the central platform. Why? It connects everything. It actually breaks the so-called silos. Why? This platform is for MSMEs, where MSME is the foundation of most of the ASEAN economies. So it's clearly we are, shooting on the right priorities and also the legacies, right? Then we have all these other legacies that we are in, and we added one more at the last meeting of the ASEAN Bac, which is what we thought is the ASEAN retail, right? We want to create this ASEAN retail exhibition where we want to have all the ASEAN's retailers to actually work together, and that's something I do believe a proof that actually ASEAN centrality is something that can happen, in which then everyone is supporting that. It's very clear. But the only thing that we want to make sure on the centrality is because it's the same as our theme, innovating for a greater inclusivity. So everybody agrees. So we want to make sure inclusivity, not leaving nobody behind, and making sure let's think out of the box with innovations. And for me, when I thought about this is important because innovation reflects what is today, what is being, the world changing of technology, of AI and so forth. So that actually addresses that. But the end today, when we had our meeting with the ASEAN Economic Ministers, very much they are very supportive of ASEAN Bac's priorities, legacies, and even the existing legacies that is from all other ASEAN nations, like the Philippines, like from Thailand and all. And what is very, very important also is what we call the PPP, or in Indonesia, Joko Widodo always mentioned about our president's Indonesia Incorporated. And now we are exporting that definition to become ASEAN Incorporated. And now, the proof is, at the ASEAN Economic Ministers meeting, everyone support to create a joint committee between the public sectors and the private sectors, right? And this is great. This is a call. So what we started with, that we introduced what we call the ASEAN Incorporated, it becoming a reality. And that's in my opinion, that's a success. And so we have to thank also Pak Joko Widodo, our president, who have the ideas of Indonesian Inc. and now with the ASEAN Inc. So I do believe this is at least a move forward, and this is where it proven that ASEAN now is not only a government-led, but is a co-driving between the public, the governments, and the private sectors. And I think it's great.
That is such a big leap. I really agree with you. Now, I'm gonna be getting in detail with your one of your priorities. The first would be food security. Regarding the food security, India has just banned exports on several types of rice, and also, unfortunately, the Black Sea Grain Initiative fails. So, how does it affect Indonesia and ASEAN in the food security sector, and how do you mitigate it?
First of all, that actually prove again the importance and the priority of the food security for ASEAN nation. So this is the time for ASEAN nations to work together on this food security. And this is where also, when we talk about inclusivity, that's why in our legacy of food security we call it the inclusive closed loop model for agriculture, right? Why? Because we want to make sure that, yes, let's talk about food security among ASEAN nations, right? That's so that we can create a supply chains of food security within us, but at the same time, we cannot leave the farmers behind. We have to make sure that our farmers in ASEAN, or the smallholders, be part of this movement of food security. So we're not just talking about food estates, talking about large corporations, just government doing something, but actually making sure farmers, smallholders are being part of this food security that we are trying to do. So
it's more like including a more public and the farmers to the program, not just between the governments.
This is all about not just the government. In Indonesia, this is the word of gotong royong, right? This is inclusive collaborations. So this is inclusivity in collaboration. So it shows here. It's very clear, right? So I do believe then we did right, to say about food security.
I would say we're on the right path with considering your statement. Next up, the another priorities of yours of ASEAN Bac is to for the development sector of EV. So Indonesia has just released initiatives for EV purchases, and Vietnam has been developing EV. Yeah, and so where are we leading to for the EV industries?
I think it's very clear. Number one, that originally again, it was initiated in Indonesia by our presidents of the government of Indonesia about the electric vehicles ecosystems strategy, and then after that, during the Labuan Bajo meetings of the leaders, our president Joko Widodo basically brought this ecosystem or electric vehicle ecosystem strategy at the ASEAN level. And everyone in ASEAN, all the leaders agreed to that, and now we are in this process of creating this ecosystem within ASEAN. So Vietnam is already making electric vehicles that they export to the US, and as an example, right? So now, Thai will be doing it. Another country, Indonesia, is doing that too. So this is great. One is the manufacturing, but when we talk about ecosystems, we are not talking about just manufacturing of it, right? This is an ecosystem. In order for the successful of electric vehicles, for example, we have to make sure that it's supported by various things. Number one is policies. This is government policies. How to support it? For example, Indonesia, right, giving incentive for electric vehicles and so forth. Of course, I always keep saying that the government of Indonesia should also create incentive programs Singapore, as an example, I spoke to the Minister of Trade of Singapore, and they're going to start that by 2030 to have all only electric vehicles coming into the market. That's another thing, right? Now, even in even a country like Myanmar, as an example, right now they say no, we only want electric vehicles because they need to save on their fossil fuel subsidy, as an example, right? Indonesia is moving that way. Okay, now manufacturing, but then besides that manufacturing, we are doing batteries. The batteries needs the minerals, so that's why we have the nickel processing, right? The value added of that, right? And so this is part of building up these ecosystems, right? And we are doing bauxite, for example. Bauxite, we are trying to do that as a value added to create aluminium to make the electric vehicles lighter. Because the lighter the vehicles, the less energy is needed. And that's actually saving energy too. There's energy efficiencies, right? That's all part of this. And this ecosystem, also we need the recharging of those electric vehicles. That needs to be built as an infrastructure, right? That's, of course, you have to be there. And then recycling of the batteries. We need to have a recycling plan to make sure that we can actually recycle the batteries, right? So it is an ecosystem. And now, how can we work between each other? Complementary values among ASEAN countries, right? And Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, I mean, all of us. The Philippines, for example, the nickels. We got to work with Philippines, trying to do co-investment of the nickel processing or doing the batteries, yeah? So that's what we are doing. And even then, we even go further, right? Now we work with Australia. We signed with Australia on critical minerals and how we can actually work because they got lithiums, right? So all this is actually, again, is the process of building an ecosystems. It's not just manufacturing, but it's whole ecosystems of electric vehicles.
That was very enlightening. Thank you so much, Mr. Arsjad Rasjid. That was, I believe, where ASEAN are in safe hands and it's just moving forward for a better future.
This shows there's ASEAN centrality happening.
That's true, really. That would conclude the report from me talking to Mr. Arsjad Rasjid regarding the meeting of ASEAN Bac and what can we expect from ASEAN in the future.